On October 1st, 2025, the Israeli Navy intercepted the global Sumud Flotilla on its way to Gaza. This incident has sparked worldwide debate about international law, humanitarian aid, and regional security. Today, we break down everything you need to know. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is both timely and deeply complex: the interception of the global Sumud Flotilla by the Israeli Navy as it attempted to reach Gaza. This flotilla, made up of more than 40 vessels and around 500 participants, included parliamentarians, lawyers, medical professionals, activists, and even internationally known figures such as Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. The aim of the flotilla was to deliver humanitarian aid directly to Gaza, challenging the naval blockade that has been in place since 2007. Israel, however, maintains that the blockade is necessary for its national security to prevent weapons and dual-use materials from reaching militant groups, particularly Hamas. In this section, we'll set the scene, looking at the flotilla's organization, why it was launched, and how this single journey became the focus of international attention. The event matters not only because of the people involved or the aid being transported, but also because it reignited a global conversation about legality, morality, and security. Over the course of this video, we will explore the historical context, the details of the interception itself, reactions from across the world, the legal arguments on both sides, and what this means for the people of Gaza and the wider Middle East. This is not just about one fleet of ships. It is about the clash of humanitarian ideals, political strategy, and the realities of modern warfare. Let's begin by understanding the flotilla itself. The global Sumud Flotilla was not an improvised or spontaneous mission. It was carefully planned by international NGOs, activists, and human rights groups. The term Sumud, meaning steadfastness in Arabic, reflected the mission's symbolic role, standing firm with the people of Gaza against blockade and isolation. Participants came from multiple continents, representing Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Each ship carried humanitarian cargo, including food, medical supplies, and educational materials. Organizers stressed transparency, inviting journalists and legal observers to join so that the voyage could be monitored and broadcast to the world in real time. Greta Thunberg's involvement gave the flotilla even greater media visibility, drawing in audiences who might otherwise not follow Middle Eastern politics. The flotilla's journey also highlighted the difficulties faced by activists operating in contested waters where maritime law and military enforcement intersect. Unlike earlier flotillas, which often included a handful of ships, this mission's scale, with 40 vessels, was unprecedented. The aim was not just to deliver aid, but to challenge the legitimacy of the blockade itself. For Gaza's residents, many of whom face shortages of essential goods, the flotilla represented hope. For Israel, it represented a potential threat, even if framed as humanitarian. Understanding both perspectives is essential to appreciate why the interception unfolded the way it did. On October 1st, 2025, the Israeli Navy made its move. According to verified reports from readers, and AP-13 ships were intercepted in the Mediterranean Sea. The Israeli operation relied on its Sa'ar-class corvettes and missile boats supported by naval helicopters. Shayetet 13, Israel's elite naval commando unit, carried out the boarding operations. Participants were temporarily detained, and vessels were diverted to Israeli ports. Israel emphasized that no one was harmed and that the boarding was conducted professionally under strict rules of engagement. Nonetheless, video footage released by activists showed tense moments as commandos boarded the ships, with activists chanting slogans and refusing to cooperate. The Israeli government issued statements claiming that the flotilla attempted to breach a legal and necessary blockade designed to prevent smuggling of weapons into Gaza. On the other hand, flotilla organizers immediately declared the interception an act of piracy, arguing that their ships were in international waters and carrying only humanitarian goods. The operation was over quickly, but its consequences resonated across the globe. The incident recalled earlier confrontations, most notably the 2010 Mavi Marmara raid, which ended in fatalities and sparked major diplomatic crises. Although this time no lives were lost, the political and legal storm was no less significant. The international reaction was swift and intense. Turkey condemned the interception outright, labeling it an act of terrorism. Colombia went further, expelling Israeli diplomatic staff and suspending trade agreements. Italy and Greece, while more cautious, demanded assurances from Israel that flotilla participants would remain unharmed and be released swiftly. At the United Nations, several member states called for urgent debate on the legality of Israel's actions, while human rights groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch criticized the interception as a violation of humanitarian principles. The European Union voiced serious concern and urged Israel to consider humanitarian alternatives to the blockade. The response demonstrated once again how events in the Eastern Mediterranean can ripple through global diplomacy, pulling in actors from Latin America to Europe and beyond. Meanwhile, social media amplified the incident rapidly, with hashtags about Gaza and the flotilla trending worldwide. For organizers, this confirmed one of their aims, raising international awareness. For Israel, it meant increased scrutiny and pressure to justify its security measures. Each side used the global stage to reinforce its narrative, one of humanitarian urgency, the other of security necessity. At the heart of the dispute lies international maritime law. Israel argues that blockades are legal instruments in wartime under the San Remo Manual on International Law applicable to armed conflicts at sea. By this interpretation, enforcing a blockade, even in international waters, is permissible if it is declared effective and proportionate. Israel insists its blockade of Gaza meets those conditions. Critics, however, point out that Gaza is not a traditional theater of naval warfare and that the humanitarian consequences of the blockade far outweigh any security benefits. They argue that intercepting civilian aid ships in international waters constitutes overreach and potentially violates freedom of navigation. UN reports in the past, particularly after the 2010 flotilla, have highlighted this tension, acknowledging Israel's right to security while also warning of humanitarian consequences and possible violations of international law. In the 2025 case, the debate reignited with even greater intensity. Lawyers and experts weighed in on news outlets, some supporting Israel's claims of legality, others calling the interception a breach of international norms. The complexity of maritime law means the issue is unlikely to be resolved soon, leaving both sides entrenched in their positions. The flotilla organizers quickly issued statements rejecting Israel's justifications. They claimed that their ships carried nothing but humanitarian aid and were fully transparent in their cargo. By including international parliamentarians, lawyers, and high-profile activists, they had hoped to protect themselves through visibility and legitimacy. Following the interception, they highlighted the fact that 13 ships were stopped, but more than 30 vessels continued their journey, underscoring their determination to press forward despite obstacles. Organizers called on the international community to provide naval escorts or independent monitoring to ensure safe delivery of aid to Gaza. They also demanded that detainees be released immediately and their humanitarian supplies handed over to Gaza's residents. Activists used press conferences and social media to share testimonies of the interception, describing it as intimidating, but also unifying. For them, the experience underscored the imbalance of power between unarmed civilians and one of the region's most advanced navies. They pledged to continue organizing future flotillas until the blockade is lifted. One of the most widely reported aspects of this flotilla was the participation of Greta Thunberg, already a globally recognized figure in the fight against climate change. Thunberg used her involvement to connect environmental justice with humanitarian justice. She argued that just as climate change disproportionately affects vulnerable populations, blockades and conflict similarly punish civilians who have no say in larger political struggles. After being briefly detained, Thunberg released a statement reaffirming her commitment to peaceful advocacy. She stressed that the Gaza situation is not just a regional crisis, but a global responsibility. Her words resonated far beyond traditional activist circles, engaging younger audiences and sparking conversations about how international activism can bridge multiple causes. Her involvement also ensured that mainstream global media outlets, from Europe to North America, dedicated prime coverage to the flotilla, amplifying its message. Critics in Israel, however, dismissed her participation as symbolic and uninformed, reflecting the polarized reception of such figures in deeply political conflicts. Israel, for its part, doubled down on its official narrative. Government spokespersons insisted that the flotilla posed a potential security risk and that Hamas has historically used aid shipments to smuggle weapons or dual-use materials such as metals and chemicals. Israel's Ministry of Defense reiterated that all humanitarian aid can enter Gaza through established land crossings subject to inspection. Allowing unsupervised maritime shipments, they argued, would open a dangerous loophole for arms trafficking. The Israeli Navy emphasized that its commandos acted with restraint, ensuring no harm to participants, and that detainees were treated according to international standards. Officials expressed frustration with what they saw as global hypocrisy, focusing criticism on Israel while ignoring Hamas's continued rocket attacks and military buildup. In Israeli media, the incident was portrayed largely as a successful, bloodless operation that reinforced the credibility of the Navy and Shayetet 13. However, even within Israel, some voices questioned whether the diplomatic cost of such confrontations outweighed the security benefits. The incident placed the international community in a familiar but uncomfortable position. Many governments recognize Israel's security concerns, but are also under pressure from their citizens and NGOs to address the humanitarian suffering in Gaza. The flotilla's interception revived calls for international monitoring mechanisms, with some suggesting that the UN or EU could supervise aid deliveries by sea. Others called for a reassessment of the blockade altogether, arguing that its long-term impact on Gaza's civilian population constitutes collective punishment. The event also highlighted the growing role of civil society in shaping global discourse, as grassroots movements and activists increasingly influence the agenda of states and international institutions. Ultimately, the challenge remains how to balance legitimate security needs with equally legitimate humanitarian imperatives. Without progress on the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict, incidents like this are likely to repeat, each one adding layers of mistrust and diplomatic strain. In conclusion, the 2025 interception of the global Sumud flotilla underscores the enduring volatility of Gaza's maritime frontier. For Israel, it was another demonstration of naval capability and enforcement of policy. For activists, it was a symbol of resistance and a rallying cry for humanitarian justice. For the international community, it was yet another reminder of how unresolved conflicts spill over into global politics. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire, and unless meaningful steps are taken to address both security and civilian needs, the cycle of flotillas and interceptions will likely continue. This incident has not only renewed debate over maritime law and humanitarian access, but also highlighted the power of global activism to challenge established policies. Moving forward, sustainable solutions will require dialogue, compromise, and genuine international engagement. Until then, Gaza will remain at the center of one of the world's most contentious humanitarian and political debates. If you found this video insightful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of international events. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the flotilla, Israel's actions, and the global reaction? We'd love to hear your perspective.